Some of these stories contain subject matter that may be considered sensitive to some viewers, and as always, viewer discretion is advised. And also, if you have a story you want to send my way, go to astheravendreams.com/submit and check the links down below for more information. Thank you. This whole situation that I'm about to go through happened back in the mid-80s. Back before anyone had a cell phone or the internet, and back before everyone knew what everyone else was up to. Basically, in a small town, everyone got wind of everything through the grapevine, and most of it was gossip or just half true. Not a lot different than how things are now, just a lot less technology. I was a sophomore in high school, so I was still very much getting my grips on life, and I wasn't really in tune with adults, or what most people would consider creepy. On top of this, I was a straight-A student, and my ability to pick up on social cues was legitimately non-existent. Aside from my awkward demeanor, I was also the kind of kid to be a bit of a teacher's pet. This is where Ms. Nelson enters the picture. Ms. Nelson was the art teacher at my school, and she was also my favorite teacher. I would think, after this, I could safely say that I was her favorite student. She was probably in her late 20s. She definitely wasn't that old. I was actually what was basically her teacher's assistant while I was in her class. We got along pretty well. I didn't have a lot of friends back in high school, like I said, socially awkward, so I think I kind of latched onto her since she was nice to me, and it seemed like she really appreciated me. I took 2 different art classes in freshman year, and I always did a great job with my projects. And I just assumed that that was why she had taken a liking to me. Because I considered her my friend, I would oftentimes stay after school to help her out with whatever extra thing she needed assistance with. That year, she had actually told me that she was having a bit of a get-together at her house with a few of her friends from college, and she told me that I was welcome to come along. I asked my parents if I could go over there, and they were adamant that it wasn't a good idea. I pleaded with them a bit, but they said they didn't feel comfortable with me being around a bunch of 20-somethings at a party, and me being the only 16-year-old there. It kind of irked me, but in the end, I just accepted what my parents told me and moved on. I told her during class that day that I wasn't allowed to come over for the party, and she said that she would have a talk with my parents. I told her that they were adamant, but she said they just needed convincing, and that she would go talk to them. In the end, I just let it go and I moved forward. I hadn't heard anything from neither my parents nor Ms. Nelson about it at all, so I just kind of assumed that my parents told her no, and again, that was the end of it. Then came the day of her party, which was a Friday. Of that, I'm actually certain. On Fridays, I didn't have to ride the bus home because my mom had them off, and she would always pick me up from school. And they were also the only day that I couldn't stay after, because she had to pick me up, then pick up my younger sister right after, so I had to be outside on time. The day came to an end, and I was about to leave when Ms. Nelson approached me in the hallway. I said hi, and she asked me if I was ready to go. I kind of looked at her confused and asked where we were going. She laughed and said, "Did your parents not tell you that you were allowed to come over? I talked to them, and they said it was fine." I was confused, sure, but also surprised that they said it was cool, so I immediately jumped up and said, "Let's go." I grabbed my books and followed her out to her car. where we got in and headed out to what I thought was going to be her place. Well, as I would soon find out, my parents did not tell her it was okay, and we were not going to her place. I don't know where we were going. She pulled out of the parking lot in a bit of a hurry. I remember she actually cut a car off when she made a right-hand turn. Come to find out, that car that she had cut off was actually my mother. And this is where things got a bit nerve-wracking. She was driving, I was sitting there in her car and just kind of thinking of what was going to happen at the party. This was the first party I'd ever been to with adults. Then I heard a horn start going off behind us. I hear Miss Nelson look up and say, "Who the hell is that? God, what do they want?" I glanced behind us. Sure enough, it was my mother in her dark blue sedan thing. I wave and say, "Oh, that's my mom. I think she's trying to get your attention." As I was waving and smiling, thinking nothing of it, I saw the look on my mom's face go from one of anger to genuine worry. Like it had clicked at that moment that I wasn't aware of the danger I was apparently in. Like I said, I have a really bad inability to read social cues. After a few moments, I realized that Ms. Nelson wasn't pulling over. So I said, "Hey, I think she wants you to stop so she can talk to me." And that was the moment that it dawned on me, right when Ms. Nelson started looking angry at the situation. At that moment, it clicked. Much like it had for my mom, she hadn't called them at all. She had never spoken to them to get permission for me to go to her party, and my mom wasn't trying to get her attention to talk to me. She was freaking out because she was literally watching a teacher kidnap her 16-year-old daughter right in front of her. I started freaking out, and I really wasn't sure what to do. I asked her to pull over so I could talk to my mom, and she ignored me. She blew through several stop signs, and she even ran a red light trying to get away from my mother, who, I have to say, was doing a fantastic job at keeping up. This whole thing went on for what felt like forever. She kept turning, running stop signs, cutting through side roads, but each time my mother would be right there behind her and slamming her horn. After somewhere between 10 to 20 minutes of chasing us, Ms. Nelson just looked defeated. She pulled up to one of the stop signs and stopped. She didn't look at me. She didn't say anything. She just stopped and stared forward, like she was giving me the choice of what to do. Seeing as how I was seriously horrified at what was happening, I shoved the door open and almost literally leapt out of the car. As soon as my feet hit the pavement, she spun her tires and took off down the road. My mom pulled up to me, parked her car, ran over and grabbed me in her arms and pulled me in tight. It honestly felt like she was about to strangle me with how hard she was hugging me. But I just kind of hugged her back and started crying. So, the aftermath of all this, my mother drove back to the high school and went into the office and spoke to the principal. She called my dad and asked him to come and pick up my sister, but she and I had to stay at the high school and wait for the police. When they got there, I explained the situation as best as I could. My mom told them her side, and they said they would check in with the teacher. They did, however, say there may not be a whole lot that they could do, mostly because they would have to prove that I was in her car. Thankfully, they could. When I jumped out and she took off, I left my backpack, complete with my name written on the inside tag, and all my books complete with my name written in them, and all of it was sitting nicely in her back seat. With that, they were able to take her in and question her, and along with my statement and my mother's statement that I wasn't allowed to go with her, they could charge her with attempted kidnapping. So, that's the story of how I was basically kidnapped by a teacher that I thought was just being really friendly with me. Come to find out, she was actually a bit obsessed with me. To my surprise, she had called my parents and asked if I could come over. And when they said no, she was really pushy about it. And she kept saying that it would be good for me. When they continued to say no, she said that they didn't know what was best for me and that they needed to reconsider. When the cops raided her house, she had several pictures of me taken from when I was a freshman by her desk in her bedroom. Even worse, she had Polaroids of me from when I was outside of class, too. There were a few pics when I was swimming at the pool during the summer break, a few pictures of me in my backyard, and a few of me just waiting outside for my mom to come and get me. My guess, that's how she knew that this was a regular thing. She was seriously stalking me and watching my every move. Apparently, she had a really weird thing for me. Something that I never caught on to and something that I never saw coming. She was arrested and charged, like I said, but it was attempted kidnapping, and I don't think she served very much time. She was adamant through her whole trial that it was a misunderstanding, but then I testified against her, saying that she had tricked me and all that, and it was pretty open and shut. Thankfully, this didn't leave a huge scar on me, like I think it would for most kids. I moved on, I was able to move forward with my life, and although I never really liked the art teacher that replaced her, I hope that I never meet Ms. Nelson ever again. So, my story starts off only a few years ago, with me being a single woman that had literally just turned 21, and fresh off the tails of a relationship that I'd been in since I was 17. A relationship that I honestly thought was going to be the one, with a guy that I thought I was going to get married to. Unfortunately, after 3.5 years, he dropped a bombshell that he wanted to move to Texas to attend a college. We live in the Northwest, and I couldn't leave my family behind like that, so yeah, things kind of fell apart the day he decided to leave. That's not what the story's about, though, and he was a great guy. No, this story is about a guy that I met not long after that breakup. A guy that I wish would have just stayed part of the background. After my last boyfriend left, I fell into a really hard depression. I would go as far as calling myself vulnerable. I had loved him. He was great, and he just kind of got up and left me. I know now that he was simply thinking about his future, and that I should have been happy for him, but it was my first serious relationship. It had been several years, and I was hit pretty hard by it. And because of that, my sister decided that she could help me out of my slump by talking me into signing up for dating apps. I was incredibly hesitant at first, but she was very pushy and very convincing. She had actually had a lot of luck when she signed up for the one that she was pushing me onto. She had actually met her husband, my brother-in-law, on it, and they were super happy. Because of this, she had assumed that I too would find a miracle if I just logged in and swiped on the right guy. I didn't foresee that being a thing that would happen, but you never know, right? So I did as she said. I signed up for the same app that she signed up for. She showed me how to do everything, though what more is there to it than look at a profile and swipe? And then, after a few days, I actually found a guy that seemed like he and I would get along. His listed interests were similar to mine, and after we had chatted for a bit, he seemed like he was a legitimately good guy. We set up a time for us to go out and get dinner at a local bar and grill. When we met, he looked just like the picture, and we had talked about all the things that we had in common. I was expecting a catfish, but I honestly was surprised at how much like his profile he really was. We had a great night chatting, and we enjoyed our moderately priced dinner together. I thought he and I actually had something good going, and I was ready for that second date to happen. Then, the next morning, I got a text from him that was absolutely out of nowhere. He said he had an awesome time and that he seriously liked me, but then mentioned that he wasn't ready for a relationship and didn't see us being anything more than friends. I was a bit annoyed with the whole thing. I liked the guy and thought he was going to be a possible candidate for a relationship, but hey, if he's not ready, then he's not ready. And I told him that was fine, and then repeated his sentiment that I would love to be friends and hang out still. And that was where I kind of expected it all to end, but it didn't. After basically telling me that he didn't want to be anything more than just friends, he started texting me non-stop. He would message me every morning to say good morning, which it was cute at first, but it quickly got annoying when it was literally at the same time every single day. Plus, again, we were just friends. He made it clear that he didn't want anything more. I was a bit crass with him one of the mornings. Basically, I told him that while it was nice to get a good morning, he didn't have to text me every single day. He said it was all right, and then he apologized. Then, he started calling me frequently. It got to a point where I would ignore his calls and let them go to voicemail, which made it even more annoying because he would leave a voicemail each time and then would call back within 10 minutes. The times I would answer, he would tell me that he was thinking about me, and he wanted to know how I was doing. It just started to feel really weird. He broke it off with me, and now he was being the obsessive one. After a while, I'd had it. I told him that he needed to back off. He didn't want to be anything more than friends, then we would just be friends, but friends didn't bother each other constantly like this. He took it a little hard, but then said he would leave me alone and again apologized. He said that he was in a weird place and he didn't mean to annoy me or cause me any issues. And that was the last time we spoke for quite a while, which I took to mean he was done with me. Oh, how wrong I was. There was one day that I had come home from work to find my room a mess. Everything was a disaster. My clothes were strewn everywhere, my papers for class. It was like someone had gone into my room and was looking for something very specific, but had no idea where it was. So they just threw everything around in a hectic mess. I brought this up to my roommate, and she said she hadn't been home all day and that she hadn't gone into my room. I believed her. She wasn't the type to go through my things or really lie, so she decided to call her dad for a suggestion on what we should do. He had us walk through the main things, check for anything missing, make sure everything is locked, tell the landlord. We did everything he told us to, and the landlord actually made a further suggestion. Get a camera and point it in the hallways. And this actually was an idea that I kind of liked. So, the next day I went out and bought a Nest camera, and I set it up in the living room to point down the hallway toward where the bedrooms were. There was nothing for the longest time, and I thought that maybe it was just a one-time thing, until about 2 weeks later. I got notified that there was motion in the hallways while I was at a Starbucks with my roommate. We were both there. The landlord hadn't scheduled maintenance, and nobody else had a key. I opened the app to see what it was, and wouldn't you know it, there was the guy that I met on the dating app, opening my roommate's door and walking through the hallway into my bedroom. She immediately called her dad. He told us to meet him there. We were just down the street, so we got there a moment or two before he did. He showed up with his sidearm ready and told us to call the cops and to not come in unless he said to. I was a bit nervous about this whole situation. There was a guy that I thought was alright less than 2 months ago, sneaking through our place. My roommate's dad was ready to shoot him if he had to. She was calling the cops, and I was just kind of standing there, ready for all hell to break loose. Thankfully, it didn't. At least, not how I anticipated. After a few moments of shouting inside, her dad yelling for this guy to get on the ground, he actually hollered out the window for me to come inside, so I did. When I got into my room, I saw her dad pinning the guy to the ground and him wearing my underwear. I just kind of stood there, my mouth wide open, my mind trying to figure out what the hell was going on. Her dad looked up at me and said something like, "I'm going to guess he's not supposed to be in here." I told him no, and I had to leave before I started to laugh my back end off. The police showed up, and they let him put his clothes back on, but he was charged for breaking and entering. Come to find out, he'd actually done this a few times, and we didn't notice. But then he decided to make a disaster of my room when I told him that I didn't want to talk to him anymore. My roommate, in her infinite wisdom, had taken up smoking pot, but didn't want me to know. So, she left her window unlocked and was blowing the smoke outside. Because the window was unlocked, and we were at ground level, he'd found an easy access point, as long as she wasn't home. I have no idea what to say about him wearing my underwear, other than he had a really unhealthy obsession with me, but I won't judge. So this was my one and only stalker, and my only time ever using a dating app. After this, I kind of just swore off dating for a while. Someday I'll find someone for me, but until then, Mr. I'm going to break in and wear your underwear, let's not meet again. This happened a few years ago, somewhere between Thanksgiving and Christmas. I remember that I was doing some Christmas shopping for my hubby, so I had to go shopping with someone that wasn't him while he was at work. Normally, that wouldn't be so bad. But he worked nights at the time, so I was having to go out to Walmart to find something for him with pretty much any friend of mine that didn't sleep. Thankfully, I had a pretty good friend named Shannon that was very much the type to stay up all night, and she agreed that she would go with me to find something for him. I knew a few things that he wanted, specifically a couple video games that he had been clamoring for the last couple of months, and I really didn't want to spend a whole lot of time there. We got into the Walmart, and I told Shannon that I knew exactly what I needed to get back from the electronics department. She asked me if it was okay if she went and did just a bit of grocery shopping, and that she would meet me in the front of the store when she was ready. I was a bit annoyed. I was kind of hoping that she would stick by my side so I wasn't alone in the store, but at the same time, just knowing that she was around somewhere was more than enough for me to feel better. I know, it's a Walmart. What's the worst that could happen? But honestly, you never know. Anyways, I head back to the electronics section, and I'm looking at the game shelf to try and find a copy of Super Smash Bros., when I'm starting to get the feeling that someone was watching me. You know the one. That feeling when your hair kind of stands up and you feel a bit on edge. At first, I thought that maybe Shannon was going to try to jump out at me and scare me, but when I turned to look, I saw a random guy wearing a Walmart-branded vest, holding his phone out and pointing it in my direction. As soon as I turned, he quickly turned to look another way and started talking, like he was having a conversation with somebody. I didn't think much of it, really. I just kind of assumed he was on a FaceTime call or something, and that he realized he was facing me and that it was kind of awkward. It wasn't a huge deal to me. I noted what games I was needing to grab, and I went over to find someone that had a key. Of course, there was nobody there. So, I decided I would walk around a bit to see if someone in the electronics department would show up. As I'm turning down the aisle with earphones, I noticed that he too went down the aisle, but on the other end. And he was kind of just looking around like he was supposed to be there. It was then that I started thinking he was being a bit weird, but again, he worked there, so whatever. Because this guy was being a bit of a weirdo, I decided I would just go to the front and talk to someone at customer service about getting the key to electronics, since there was no one but this guy here. I walked past him in the aisle to head for the front of the store, and as soon as I actually got by him, I heard what sounded like a camera shutter sound. I stopped and turned to face this guy and ask what the hell he was doing, but by the time I turned around, I saw him turning away to walk as fast as he could the other way. At this point, I was livid. The first time I thought it was nothing, but now I was certain that this guy was trying to sneak pictures of me from behind. I stepped toward him, and I very loudly asked him what his name was. He just kept walking away. I kept yelling at him, asking who the hell he was, what his problem was, what his name was, basically anything that would get the attention of another employee. Thankfully, it did. One of the electronics employees heard me and rushed over to the guy and stopped him. He asked me what was going on, and I told him that this guy was taking pictures of me from behind, and that he had followed me around the electronics aisles with his phone out and the camera on. The guy in electronics calls up for a CSM to come to the back. The whole time, this guy is trying his hardest to get away from him, telling him that he has to go. After a few moments of waiting for the manager, and this employee trying to pull away from the electronics guy, creepy employee decided that he'd had enough and took a swing at the electronics guy to get away. It connected, and then he started booking it toward the front of the store. Thankfully, that CSM was nearby and saw what happened. He actually chased the guy and got him to the ground. Then they called the police to sort this whole thing out. So, what did we learn from the police and the CSM? This guy was a super creep. And when I mean super creep, I mean absolute skis. When he was confronted about taking pictures, he actually opened his phone and, come to find out, he had taken pictures of women in the changing rooms, under stall walls, and just random girls of various ages throughout the store. What's even worse, he didn't work there. He used to work there, but he had managed to sneak the vest out when he got fired for following people like a creep. He'd been doing this for a while, coming into the store in a uniform that was only slightly outdated, following women around to take their pictures. He was charged, obviously, and I'm pretty sure he spent a good amount of time in prison. I never went back to that particular Walmart, mostly because every time I tried, I would have a panic attack. A good lesson to take away from this situation, ladies, always be aware of your surroundings. And if it feels like someone is watching you, check your six. Also, never go alone when going to Walmart. Because some people, even the ones dressed in a trusting manner, could absolutely be the creep that's taking your picture. I have a bit of an off-kilter story that kind of teeters on the edge of a stalker story, but also is just a generalized creepy story. And this actually took place in 2020, and is one of those things that scared the hell out of me, but is also kind of a bit of an unsolved mystery for me. For the record, my wife and I are in our mid-20s. I'm 26 and she's 24. We have a 4-year-old daughter named Angel. Angel is a super sweet and very trusting little girl, and she thinks that everybody is her friend. On top of that, she's also not shy whatsoever, and she wants to have every conversation with everyone in the world. She's also super imaginative and talks to her imaginary friends as well as her stuffies all the time. So, it's not a big deal to hear her talk when there's no one else in the room. Like I said, this was back in 2020, a time when we were all going a little stir-crazy, I like to think. I was home from work and my wife was a nurse, so she was working hours that were absolutely insane. I did my best to pick up all the slack at home while she was working 60 hours a week and basically not sleeping whatsoever. Because we were both super busy, we, unfortunately, had to rely on the small TV in Angel's room to keep her occupied. Which, thankfully, there were tons of cartoons on DVD that we had. And she figured out how to work the DVD player. This meant that, again, talking coming from her room could be expected, as it could be her playing, her watching a cartoon, or talking to the cartoon. She's a very chatty kid. So one night, I think it was in August, I was cleaning up the house and trying to get dinner ready to go, when I walked upstairs and I heard Angel talking. The conversation seemed pretty innocent. She was explaining the plots to the show that she was watching. Some show about little kids being superheroes and saving the day from minor things that really didn't require a hero. I don't really remember much beyond that, just hearing her talk about the characters and how strong they were. I thought it was cute, and that was it. I went back downstairs and went back to finishing up dinner. When I was done, I went back upstairs to go and get her so she could eat, and then we could get her ready to take a bath and head to bed. I opened her door to see her standing on her bed and facing out her window, which was at this point wide open. Upon seeing it, I was a bit taken aback. She's not supposed to open that window and she knows it. Then, there's the part of, who the hell is she talking to? When I opened the door and saw it, I immediately raised my tone and asked her who she was talking to. I wasn't trying to scare her, but something was up. She turned to me quickly and said, "Sorry, Daddy." I again asked who she was talking to as I stepped forward toward the window. I looked out into the yard and, sure enough, I saw a grown man running through the backyard and jumping my fence. My initial instinct was to run outside and chase him. But I snapped back to the realization that I had a 4-year-old I needed to take care of, and a very tired wife that was about to be home. I grabbed Angel, I took her downstairs to the dinner table, and I asked her again who that man was. She said his name was Dave, and that he was our neighbor. We didn't have a neighbor named Dave. At least not an immediate neighbor with that name. I then asked her a few more leading questions, and I think I may have scared her because she started crying and asking if she was in trouble. I told her she wasn't, but I needed her to tell me what they were talking about. She told me that they were talking about her cartoon show, and that they talked about her toys. She told him that her mom was a doctor. She's a nurse, but to a 4-year-old, that's pretty much the same thing, and that I worked for the government. I asked her what he had talked to her about, and she said that he told her about his daughter and how they were the same age, and then asked her if she wanted to come and meet her. That was a terrifying thought, because I know for a fact Angel would have said yes to that question, and that guy had probably gained her trust. Then she dropped an even worse bombshell. She told me that the last time he came by, he showed her a picture of his horse, and asked if she liked horses. It was the statement, "the last time," that threw me off hard. I asked her if he'd been there before, and she told me he'd been coming by a lot over the past week. This guy had been developing a rapport with my daughter, gaining her trust, showing her things that she liked, and telling her that he had a daughter that she could be friends with, all over around a week. And the whole time, I was home, none the wiser. This guy was basically grooming my daughter into trusting him, with me less than 200 feet away. That night, I had Angel sleep in our bed with my wife, and I slept on the couch. That weekend, I went out and got some security cameras for the exterior of the house just in case he ever came back, and I made sure the lock on the window was connected better, and that she couldn't undo it anymore. Thankfully, this guy never came back, and we never saw him again. I'm still personally petrified at the thought of what he could have done, and I'm just thankful it didn't go any further, and that I happened to walk in at the exact moment that I did. So this was a collection of stalker creepy encounter stories. A little bit of both. Yeah, that last one actually scared me. I don't like that story. I do like the story. It's a good story. It's very good story in the sense that it's good entertainment, but also creepy. It's terrifying. Just a horrifying thought, honestly. I'm thankful nothing went further on that one. Still wish they would have caught the guy, obviously. But anyways, if you all enjoyed this video, please do hit that thumbs up button and let me know that you enjoyed the video in the comments down below by saying something along the lines of, "Yo, sup, Raven, I liked the vid." If you want to. You don't got to say that. Please don't say that. Anyways, if you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing. If you're not new to the channel, welcome back. Always appreciate a return customer. And if you want to support further, you can hit join down below or go to my Patreon, which is linked down in the description, where for just $1 a month you can get early access to all my content and more, which is a good deal in my opinion. Plus, you help me continue doing this. Yeah, so. Anyways, friends, I hope you're all having a beautiful day, and I hope I will see you on the next video. But until then, my beautiful friends, sleep well.